Welcome to another episode of the Vital MX Post-Race Show, recapping round 8 of 2026 Monster Energy AMA Supercross, that being at the famous Daytona International Speedway, and we had a very famous Daytona winner once again. But we'll get into all of that and more in this episode of the Vital MX Post-Race Show, of course, made possible by all of our fabulous partners who you will hear more from over the next 70 to 80 minutes. I'm your host, Lewis Phillips, joined by Michael Lindsay. How are you doing?
Been better. Got a little stranded last night without a hotel. Thank you, Priceline. But other than that, we're good.
What do you mean stranded without a hotel?
Well, you know how Daytona, the whole area is always booked out for bike week. I was heading north for the GNCC, so I booked a room 30, 40 minutes north of Daytona, and I got there and the hotel was overbooked. And the guy at the clowner said, "Who did you book through?" And I'm like, "Priceline." And he very bluntly was like, "Well, call them. It's their problem now, not mine."
I've never
So
heard
at
of this
about
happening at a hotel, but
it's happened to me more than once, but it is very rare. So yeah, I was sitting at a parking lot at 1 a.m. trying to find hotels in Daytona area, which is, yeah, there are none this time of year. I stayed in the worst motel I think I've stayed in potentially in the last 10 years. The next morning we went to go out and there was somebody dragging trash bags out of the room next to us. I'm pretty sure they had been living in the unit for months. Like clothes, workout equipment, random bottles everywhere, rolled office chairs in a hotel room they were rolling out. I was very confused.
well, it must be a great place then if people are choosing to live there for that long.
Sure, let's go with that.
That tells me it's good. They clearly didn't want to leave. What a place.
Clearly that's
And that's almost relevant to Eli Tomac. He doesn't want to leave.
no.
He loves this place. Speaking of Daytona specifically, his 8th win. I don't want to say it was never in doubt because, truth be told, I picked Hunter after qualifying. I felt like with his SMX prowess, his outdoor capabilities, then his speed in practice to boot, and then the fact that he is traditionally, at least in 2026, a better starter than Eli, I really had the feeling that Hunter was going to pull it off. But ultimately, come main event time, Hunter, Kenny, Coop, they all found out that stopping Eli Tomac at Daytona is just that difficult. So not a surprise, but maybe a little bit of a surprise at the same time.
A little. I mean, I agree with you. I thought Hunter was the most likely to dethrone Eli if it were to happen, but I was still heavy favorite Eli. It is unique. You know, there are venues that suit people, like take the whole San Diego situation with Reed over the years, but Daytona is the only real supercross that, similar to an outdoor nationals, the conditions are, even though the track does change quite a bit year to year, there are certain things about the conditions, the material, the layout that suit a person. And yeah, eight wins and 12 attempts on 3 different OEMs says a lot. It is truly Eli's house, and it takes a lot to defeat him there. I mean, I think it makes Ken's win last year even a little bit more impressive when you think about it. I mean, Eli has only lost this thing really on off years.
Well, Eli wasn't there last year.
That would explain a lot. I don't know.
But still, I mean, Kenny's
Great
win was
way to
still
start
impressive.
this. Great way to start this. Sorry. So of the current roster, would it be, of course, we didn't have Jet. Is Jet the only one for a heads-up defeat to
Well,
Eli
Dungey
in the
won in
current?
16, so Eli would have been there, but of course
I
it
meant of
wasn't
the
like...
current. Yeah, I meant of the
Oh,
current roster,
but
even
yeah.
though technically Jet's off, but of the guys still racing,
Yeah.
Jet's the only one that's got a heads-up defeat.
Yep, it's only Jet. But you mentioned the layout there, and bizarre to me, so we had a slightly different Daytona. Ricky Carmichael said it was a conscious decision to reduce airtime. There's typically a lot of that at Daytona.
Mm-hmm.
But Ricky also said a lot pre-race that it's probably going to be one of the faster Daytonas. Whereas I looked at the layout and thought the complete opposite, because there was a lot more switchbacks, there wasn't the long straight along where the finish is. I felt like it was going to be a slower Daytona. Then in post-race discussions and throughout the day, I feel like I heard people go, this is the fastest Daytona we've ever had, and then also, this is the slowest Daytona we've ever had. I feel like the entire industry is split on whether this was a fast or a slow Daytona, for whatever reason.
I was confused with that too. I guess when I think fast, I feel like you said, it's missing some of the huge open sections. I mean, there's been years where we've literally gone from one end of the facility to the other with no break in between it, like some long rhythm lane, walls all the way into the finish, etc. And there's been years where there's been more switchback. I guess what I would take away from it is maybe it didn't have some of the massively open sections we've had in the past, but I guess maybe you would call it the average speed because it had a good amount of sections that had some distance to them. That was about the best I could come up with for why so many riders mentioned it's still being potentially the fastest Daytona they'd raced. It was one of the most simple ones. I mean, we still have the, what do you call it, the off-angled kind of roller section after the finish, but we don't have the moguls of old years. We didn't have as many. We had some speed checks, but not like direct walls. There was a few things that it was missing. Maybe a few of the items that I've become accustomed to seeing at Daytona over the years.
I mean, yeah,
It was
honestly,
very
the
it was very
sand,
simple.
it was just the sand. The sand was
Yeah.
everything. Without the sand, it was just a vanilla Daytona. And not because Vanilla Ice was there.
And I was gonna say, even with that, probably one of the more simple sand sections they've had in a long time. Just
I don't
one
know.
straight of it into a roller left,
No, I
right.
feel like that was super. Like a lot of the riders referenced it after the race. There was a lot of mistakes there, and even stepping foot on it after the race, I was surprised how deep it was. I think the sand was. I think there was some sort of calculation in the sand because, like, Pierce was one of the 250 guys going the longest in the sand in the main event, but he said that to judge how soft it was upon landing and whether you could carry momentum was spinning him out, and he didn't know what to do with that. So I think the sand was technical Daytona tradition, whatever else. But to be honest with you, I mean, I think everyone would agree with this. I think Daytona has lost some of its iconic nature over the years. Of course, we're no longer daytime when all of that sort of stuff, that's been gone a while. But it is becoming more, yeah, I'll use that word again, I think vanilla with each year that passes. And I don't really know how you fix that without straying very, very far from what Supercross is.
Yeah. The one thing is, so off the back of some of the reporting you did last year, especially around the SMX time, I caught up with the Daytona president, Frank, on Friday briefly. What's his name? Keller? Frank Keller,
I
correct?
think it's Kelleher. It's
Keller.
either Keller or
Um,
Kelleher.
I asked him to follow up on the request to hold an SMX round, which he detailed a little more about what they presented, Feld, layout, ideas, etc. I mean, I think you had already mentioned this. They don't want to do it unless they don't want to give up their traditional date to hold it. They would like to hold both, so that's still ongoing. But amongst that, I asked him, okay, if we were to hold SMX here, would the track really be any different? And he was like, absolutely. He labeled out how kind of over where we parked the cars behind the garage. He's like, we could run into the road race section. We could actually use part of the banking for a potential first corner, a few things like that. And instantly I was like, well, I would love to see, not to that huge extent the road race, but thinking of the banking, a few things. I'm like, I would love to see us get outside of the little confines we have on the tri-oval for maybe the traditional race, but the tough part is the Daytona 200 road race is always the next weekend, so potentially getting on the asphalt. And for somebody that hasn't been to Daytona before, if you went there, God, over 10 years ago when it's still the pit lane paving wasn't as big, when you really walk and feel how small the distance is from the edge of pit lane to the banking, the confines have gone pretty tight on what they can do with the layout there. It is missing, the pure size of area they used to have, which offered them a little more area to work in between. Because right now the lanes are tight. They won't let any of the photographers, any of us out in the center to shoot anywhere. There's not really the space to with the way they lay out these days. We're stuck on the far ends of the track for confines.
Yeah, it all makes sense. Let's get back to Tomac. So once again, he was raving about how great the KTM was at Daytona, specifically in the sand section. That tracks with everyone who's been on a KTM, is on a KTM, has gotten off a KTM. Everyone has kind of told me that the KTM in sand is superior to all, and that's kind of its sweet spot. So perhaps that supports that claim. He also mentioned he struggled in the whoops a little bit. Throughout practice, said he improved in the main, and I was just looking at whoop sector times. And weirdly, it's true that he improved in the first half of the main, or the first third, let's say, and the final third. And in the middle of the main, laps 9 to 14, let's call it, around there, Hunter was just killing him in the whoops, killing him. But it was only for a brief period. But it was consistent enough where it was a trend. But I can't really make sense of why that would come and go, because by the final 4 laps, Eli had kind of leveled it out and it was back to being par. So maybe it was just back markers, I don't know, but there was a bit of a dip there in the whoops at the midway point.
I'd have to go back. I shot that section for a little while. I ran into this both with the 250 and 450 class is like a traditional East Coast Supercross. The whoop section got a pretty heavy center V section, which if you nail perfect, you can glide right through. Of course, if you make a mistake, you start getting that kind of ping pong effect through them. I felt like I saw Eli just constantly changing. I'd have to go back and watch replays, but from memory, I remember seeing him constantly switch lines where I think Hunter just had a great skim line through the V rut and was killing it. I think Eli kept switching around, maybe trying to get out of it, trying to get on the right side, trying to get left side. I saw the same from Kenny, and both for both Eli and Kenny, it resulted with moments in the main where one or two laps they would kind of kill it, and then one or two laps they would basically come out of the whoops completely sideways before the triple, especially really struggling on the last like four whoops to keep the bike tracking straight, where every single lap Hunter was just straight as an arrow through there, right into the triple. Really, no big moments.
Yeah, there was definitely one lap where Tomac got super squirrely. You could probably find it on the sector times because I'd imagine it was a lap where he was 2 seconds slower in the whoops compared to every other lap throughout the day. But apart from that, that was maybe the only sketchy moment I saw from Eli all day. So, I mean, it's Eli. Full credit to him.
Yeah. Hey, one thing I was thinking about with Eli, and I saw it, Daytona, of course, we're used to seeing these moments with Eli where big corners, heavy throttle, heavy clutch, wide open. And yes, that existed in places. I've also noticed this the last couple of rounds is Eli talked to you about getting his corners back, and one part of it that has stood out to me a little bit is at the times that he wants to shorten up the track. And it kind of made me think about Webb a little bit. Webb is always super well known for shortening up the corners, cutting them down, etc. And he really maximized that during his KTM era, and then has tried to carry that as much as he can to his Yamaha era, which I think Coop's been a little bit vocal at times about trying to maintain that on the Yamaha, is maybe taking a little more work with setup. With Eli's time at KTM, I feel like at certain rounds I've seen him use that a little bit more. And there was a part of me that would love to ask him basically like, hey, yes, this is Coop's strength, but does this bike bring it out a little bit in you? And now that you're accessing it a little more often, does it kind of make you think, this is something I was missing for this time. Like this is a little bit how Coop built this. I can see how he really got proficient at doing this with this bike. Because the generation of the bike has changed, of course, but just the overall characteristic of the KTM and him talking about how planted the front end is, how much traction it produces, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote this last week because this was obviously a topic in Arlington, and Ian Harrison addressed it in a team manager scrum as well. And he said, yeah, like, this is a trait of the KTM from Tomac loved it, Webb loved it, Dungey loved it, Marvin loved it. Like, the bike just corners well. And it got me thinking, though, because this is what I wrote. I don't think we gave the KTM that credit in the Webb era. We just gave that credit to Webb because that's what he's known for. So I don't know if we've ever necessarily put, because I don't think that was ever really said about Dunge. I mean, I guess Marvin, again, I think the credit went to the crafty Frenchman more so than look what a KTM lets him do. I think this is the first time in KTM's short successful Supercross history that we've actually looked at the KTM and not the rider and said, wow, this bike really has an advantage in corners.
Well, I think because it's maybe the most different the rider. Again, like you said, Dungey was just always so proficient. He keeps similar to a Webb, like keeps the track short, takes proficient lines, etc. That's Dunge's characteristic a bit in the 450 class. Like you said, Marv is the crafty Frenchman, the unique lines. Cooper, we just, he definitely took it to the farthest level in terms of shortening up the track, cutting down. So, like you said, it got attached to him. And then think of the next generation, which will come to a point saying is like Chase there was a mixed bag. But now that we have Eli, who has got so much history to go back on other bikes and the way he rides them and the way he would corner them, that yes, it stands out. I feel like way more with Eli. And like I said, it's finally coming to a place where it's like, oh, this has something, don't get me wrong, the rider has to work hard for this stuff. I'm like, the bike is part of this. It stands out a lot more, and more kudos and credit to KTM. And one other fact I'll leave on that is, and I had it as a note, I think since the switch with Eli going to KTM, it's been a surprise. It's been refreshing to see how he does on the bike. We've kind of had this whole Chase versus Prado narrative in terms of them switching OEMs and what they think of each other's bike. And somebody said this to me this weekend, and I hadn't really thought of it like this, is they said, wow, if, honestly, Eli is the one that's making Chase's decision to leave look bad because of how Eli's performing on the bike. Not as much how Prado is performing on it, but there's actually a topic in our forum that says Tomac is really loving Sexton's bike, quote unquote. It's not the same setup, of course, but it is interesting that one top tier rider struggled and left, but the rider before him in Webb and the rider post him in Tomac of a championship caliber are finding more success.
I don't think it's Tomac making the decision look bad. I don't think it's Prado making the decision look bad. I think it's WP, if anyone, because it all just comes down to, I believe, the all-new fork and shock from WP. I think that's the key to the lock. If it would be a very different narrative if that didn't arrive until 2027, let's say, and it really was apples to apples with the bike Tomac is racing versus what Chase was racing. But I think the difference in WP components, of course, Chase was on KYB anyway, but I think this WP stuff really has put the KTM back into the window of brilliance that it was at for the best part of a decade. 2025 and a bit of 2024 was definitely a blip, let's say, more than the trend or the tail. So I think that it's WP who gets the credit for Tomac loving the KTM, and they are the one that fall into the narrative of like maybe Chase should have been on that or could have had that or whatever else.
I agree, but also you look at the success, and yes, we know they had some shock errors at the time, but you look at the success they gained on other platforms with Tom, with RJ at the time. They won titles, and ultimately we know that Chase likes a pretty weird, unique setup. There's also a counter argument that could be like, okay, well, the way Eli is setting up his bike, maybe even on prior components, it still would have worked pretty well.
Yeah, I don't think you can take the Tom and RJ thing, though. Like, you can't compare 250s. I don't think.
I think you can just compare overall success. I'm just saying I think it's not the end all be all answer, but I think you cannot discount that, though, the fact that, hey, the blip also in there is Chase not finding success on the platform while many others did.
Yeah, but the blip is also Tom Vial leaving midday because he's over it. Like, that's the bigger blip here more than anything, I would argue. So that is also a valuable piece of information that I think you need to throw into the ring every single time you discuss it. Because as you said, Tom had success and Tom was a KTM lifer. And he left midday. So I think that's the smoking gun, if anything. But anyway, congrats to DeCal Works, by the way. Their first Daytona Supercross win in the 450 class since 2016, attached to the iconic now number 3 at Daytona. Congrats to DeCal Works. And you can get full customizable graphics at decalmx.com. Of course, Tomac did have heavy competition from Hunter Lawrence, as mentioned, and Hunter, now a trait of his, was coming on extremely strong in the closing stages. Now, with more information behind us, I would love to ask Eli if he was marking Hunter and that gave him the hurry up, or if Jade put something on the pit board, because as I think was clear to everyone, in the final third of the race, Hunter was gaining considerably on Eli. And Eli hadn't done below a 120 since lap 10. Then on lap 16, he randomly dropped to a 118 to match Hunter. Again, clearly noticing the Hunter was coming on quite strong and he needed to up the ante a little bit. I would just love to know what forced that, or whether it was just, maybe he wasn't paying attention to Hunter and Hunter was almost irrelevant and Eli just randomly started to find a good line again that he hadn't been using. I don't know.
That is always the funny part with Daytona. I feel like most rounds you see a blip in time like that and you would be like, okay, they definitely were signaled or pressured or pushed, but just the way Daytona breaks down to, all it takes is one lap of, finding a little better flow state for a couple sections, jumping a couple braking bumps, hitting a couple sections different to, again, the time variance can be a little bit larger on that track.
I do think, though, to our earlier point about Daytona, I think this was the least we've ever seen that at Daytona. I think it was the easiest to be consistent, the most consistent Daytona we've maybe ever had. Because if you go through lap times and stuff, there isn't much variation. And there wasn't examples of like, hey, this guy just fell off because of fitness, or this guy's just lost the toe. There was none of that really. It was it fit the narrative of a normal Supercross with the way the races played out.
The interesting one too, I was going to say is so Eli was asked, I think this was on the podium, maybe it was post-race press conference, just about, the love of Daytona, what it is he likes about it. One thing he stated was the fact that more than any other Supercross, he feels like on the schedule, there's room to drastically make up time. And again, to your point, when he even said that, I'm like, I feel like that's true of tracks of the past and part of some of his biggest performances there. Even take some of the highlight reels of like James there and stuff is there's stuff that the guy who wins is doing that nobody else is doing, or the top two or three are doing something extreme. Other than the tripling off the wall into the sand rollers, which don't get me wrong, it was big, but it wasn't that inconceivable. It was just trying to figure out the angle in. There was nothing on it that was like wow, that only two guys could do this. They were really hanging it out to pull off this section. If anything, the biggest thing on the track, and it was more just timing, was after the finish line, after the speed check wall was getting that triple in, was just for the 450s, it wasn't bad. The 250s, it was a little sketchy, but it was interesting to hear Eli say that because what I'm saying to your point was there was a part of me I remember that kind of reacted to him saying that. I'm like, yeah, that's been true in the past, but there wasn't a lot about last night's track that was like, oh yeah, Eli could pull out a second or two by going beast mode, quote unquote, here or there, or this guy was, or something like that. And I think that was almost to give Hunter a little more credit, even in this situation. There also wasn't any, like you said, Hunter's whip speed was incredible, but there wasn't maybe one huge section that Hunter was just doing something different and he was just freaking good.
Yeah, and I think the ultimate testament to Hunter is Lars Lindstrom told me after the race that they are disappointed. Second's great, but they do feel a little bit like we had more here. And if you're at a position where second at Daytona behind Eli Tomac is a disappointment, I think that says it all as far as how far Hunter's come, the position he currently occupies, how good he is. I honestly think that's almost a mic drop statement. And it's about a second place.
No, I agree with that. And one of my takeaways from the night, I would say, is, yes, Eli won Daytona. Anybody could predicted that. However, the fact that Hunter was that close, Hunter was that competitive at the race that naturally, in a sense, should be Eli's. It made me think about the season going forward and how excited I am to watch these two go at it because I don't know. Yes, there's not a round like Daytona, but there is, depending on conditions of soil and track layouts, there's times where you would sit there and go, oh, this could be an Eli track. Like Hunter's performing well in all scenarios so far. So it's like, I, I don't feel like it's going to trend either guy's way, at least for the next few weeks. Like I'm hoping we get some really good mano a mano out of these two because if anything, yes, Eli won last night, but I walk away going these two are even more evenly matched than I felt going into it. Like it made me come away going, okay, let's watch these two go for it for the next. What do we have? 9 weekends left, Lewis? 9 races?
We're eight.
It
Yeah,
was around
nine
eight.
left.
Yeah, yeah.
So where are we at with Cooper Webb? Because I'll be honest, when I pulled up the championship standings, I expected to see him 14, 15 behind. I was very surprised it was 20. And I think the narrative that's dominating conversations post Daytona is this a two-man race? I'm not there yet, but I am surprised considering how solid Webb has been lately. Like, I think on the surface, you're kind of just under the belief that it's been great and this is fine.
Yeah.
But he's obviously been bleeding a little bit. So
Yeah.
is Indy a massive test? Is it make or break?
It's not make or break, but need to get the train back on the tracks. And yes, to your point, same thing. I went and looked at the points. Him and Kenny are tied. I think they're both 20 down on Hunter. You might as well say Eli because Eli's only 1 point down on Hunter. And I think the takeaway is he still hasn't gone, he has made progress on occasion, but if you really look at it, there's only been two, maybe 3 rounds. Again, it kind of had to do some jostling where he's actually made points back on the lead position. And one or two of those has been more the leader also having a bad night and everybody around it. So 8 rounds in, more than half of the races Coop has bled points. And even since his win, particularly, or 2 weeks in a row with him bleeding points. And now at this point, I can't remember the basic math behind it, but is this the compared to his worst, is this the farthest he's been out of the championship or right about? Because we made progress back. I mean, we got one big point swing, and then again, we're chipping the other direction now.
I'm not sure how you expect me to have that off the top of my head, so I don't know. That's far too deep. I need to research that. Like you can't just throw that out of nowhere. Like, yeah, that's far too deep to know. Just be like, yeah. I mean, ask me Wednesday, I'll probably have figured that out.
No, but you get my point. Like, I think we were high on it there for a couple weeks that he was going to work his way back into this, and yeah, there's been moments, but he hasn't effectively worked his way back into it. And it is interesting. Is on one hand, I would leave Daytona going, well, yeah, it's Daytona. It's not. It's maybe not the place he would do it, but also historically, how many times has Webb finished second at Daytona?
Yeah,
Especially Eli, like
this was a flatter Daytona for Webb.
It's not track he's won at a 40, but yeah, which is crazy to say because I think most fans would see him getting for them be like, oh no, that's typical of Webb there, but that actually is a flat performance for him there. He is consistently on the podium, consistently second at this race.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call it make or break, but I would say that Indy is a massive opportunity simply because with Indy's characteristics, I would expect Webb to capitalize there. If it's another third or fourth, and it's another instance where he's lost points, and again, at what should be one of his better venues, and typically I think he's fairly solid in Triple Crowns. I don't think he has the stats of Tomac, but he certainly doesn't struggle with a Triple Crown format. I would think that this would be a good weekend for him, if not a great one. So that's what I'm kind of looking out for. But it's definitely go time. It's definitely go time for Webb because you can't lose many more points. And it is also funny because for Roczen and Webb to be tied at this point, in my mind, like just if you ask me off the cuff, I think Webb has had a much better season than Roczen. And I kind of can't make sense of the fact where they are tied.
No, I agree. I was actually shocked to see they were tied because, yes, if you walk right up to me and ask me which one's having a better season, I would say Webb, but I guess that's a representation of, again, how slow to start of the season Webb was, where Kenny had such good early rounds and they're just starting to level off. I guess from here on out, like you said, you made the two in horse comment. Speaking of Roczen, so are we done in the sense of a Roczen title contender conversation? Are we effectively out on that? Are we down to the top two plus, the coupon looking in?
I was encouraged that Roczen in the press conference was talking title. 8 rounds in and whatever else. It was quite nice to hear Roczen saying, like, yep, I know where I am in points. I know what I need to do. It's good for me that Hunter didn't win because that stopped the bleeding a little bit. I don't know if we have typically got to round 8 recently with Roczen having that sort of mentality. So I think that speaks volumes, but it just goes again to what we have said in recent weeks. And as it stands right now, if you want me to bet on Webb clawing back 20 points in the second half of the season, I can do that because we've seen it. It's quite feasible. You can imagine the roadmap. As we've said with Roczen, that's not been proven. That would go against the grain, and therefore I struggle to put my full support behind it.
So we haven't really done this season. We usually do it quite a bit. Is title percentages 40-40-20 sound fair?
40-40-20. Webb and 0 for Roczen? Yeah?
40% Hunter, 40% Eli, 40% Hunter, 40% Eli, 20% Coop, 0% Roczen.
Yeah, I mean, that I was thinking about it like
Too
20
harsh?
I was thinking about it like 20 minutes ago when we were talking, and that was what I immediately went to. If you want me to think about it, I could get a bit cuter with it and probably go a bit more specific. But I think on the surface, yeah, 40-40-20 is like the logical option, let's say. If you want to go 45-35 in Tomac's favor, then sure. I think that's also acceptable and quite logical. But yeah, I don't think Chase is going to win this championship now. So he's out. And yeah, I think we're not at a 2-man race yet, but we're trending there.
I think that part's over.
You never know. Things have happened.
Speaking of speaking of our top two in general, the way we're trending, let me hit you with another one. When we get to the end of this championship, whether let's talk on the two-man horse situation. Maybe not, because Coop would be a part of this, but what do you think the win total is going to be at the rate we're going? When we get to the end of this, regardless of who wins the title, are we sitting on Eli at like 7, 8, 9 wins with Hunter at 3 or something? Does Hunter start to rack off more wins and start to even out with Eli? Same, Webb. Like, do you think we'll start to get this whole group more evened out, or do you still see a scenario where we end a championship where potentially one rider has a fairly larger number of wins than the other, regardless of their actual results in the championship?
Well, the biggest stat, or the most telling stat at this point is the fact that Tomac has 4 wins and no one else has more than 1. Like, that is incredible. And also equally incredible when you say, and Tomac isn't even leading the championship. That is also tough to comprehend. I think that's telling. There's no way. I mean, how does Tomac not end the season with the most wins? Someone else is going to have to just absolutely dominate the rest of the season. So without doubt, I think Tomac ends with the most wins, championship or not. Yeah, Tomac will get to 7 or 8. I can't see any of the others now going more than I'll say 4 at a push, but I kind of want to say 3, because we're halfway through and they're all sat on 1. So, again, for them to be pushing 5 wins, they're going to have to dominate and will probably be the champion as we head down the stretch. So, but the Tomac 4 wins to everyone else's 1 is crazy. And again, maybe we're not giving Tomac enough credit. I don't know. The points certainly don't tell the story of how good he's been. Moving on. Savatgy was content with 5th after the race, not stoked. He said it was a weird 5th, and I think the reason is why. The reason is clear. He felt as though it was weird because he got 5th and he didn't think he rode amazing. He felt like he was just out there. He said that many times. And I think for Joey to get 5th on a meh weekend for him is maybe still taking some time to understand that he's that good now, and this is kind of just where he is. Factory transmission now. He's very excited about that. And Joey, I've said it last few weeks, Joey is still my rider of 2026. Joey is an incredible story. Joey is definitely on the podium here soon. And it's just cool. And hey, he's 10 points behind Chase and Jacob, tied for 5th in the championship. So if he can make a run at top 5 in the championship as well, that will just be the bow on a tremendous season.
Can we convince Joey that main events are in fact heat races? Because again, yes, the 5th in the main is fantastic, but even his heat race performance, right on Hunter. Again, he has been. I agree with you again when you have the podium conversation, because you see it in the heats, you can visualize it happening. And actually, you already cleared a point I was going to ask about the factory transmission, because I thought I had heard he had finally gotten his hands on it. Was it new just for this weekend, or did he actually have it
Arlington
last weekend?
Arlington, so the heat race where he passed Tomac and almost won, I think Hunter was in that as well, in Arlington, now makes a lot more sense.
All down to the factory training, right?
That's what he'll tell you. He's very high on this thing. He said it's unbelievable. I said, is it as good as you expected? And he was like, better. Couldn't say enough good things about this transmission.
I'm curious, other than just being like, it's great, did he actually get into detail about what it's helping him with? Is it the classic, we have the long first gear, we can 3 in? Is it how it carries in the whoops? What was he most excited about?
Yeah, he said the longer first. He said the triple quad in Arlington. He said the longer first helped him triple in, and he doesn't think it would have been as easy with stock transmission. He said the starts are amazing, and he doesn't have to panic on starts now. He said before it was basically, I'm going to fight my bike to the first corner, whereas he said now he can just focus on himself. But at the same time, he said he hasn't had the transmission in his practice bike yet, so he hasn't done many starts with it, which is why the main event start, for instance, wasn't ideal. He said he's got it in his practice bike now, so this week he'll do starts, and then he should be more consistent out of the gate come Indy. But those are the two main things. He's just in love with the first gear, which is, of course, the biggest benefit. Said the second gear is a little bit odd. and he's still kind of working around that in his mind. Like he can't quite figure out the second gear and where it works per se. But very high on the first gear. And he said that Honda, like after the heat, again, the heat in Arlington where he passed Tomac, and I think it was Hunter in that. I'll keep saying Hunter. He said that the HRC guys came by after the heat and congratulated him and told him good job. So he's getting attention. He's getting the love that he wholeheartedly deserves.
Nice. Speaking of, you were saying chasing fifth in the points for him behind Jacob and Sexton. Something I was going to ask you about before we got to the Joey conversation was the chase sized hole per se in Daytona. We talked a little bit about winners. I know, it'll probably be, we don't know how long it'll be till we get Chase back. It will be, I would imagine, based on trending of his prior crashes, maybe not next week, might be a few weeks. Do we have it's so, what's the word I'm looking for? It's so theoretical, but are we out on him really being involved in race win hunt, getting involved in mixing up this championship the rest of the season, or are we relegating ourselves to Joey's going to surpass him for fifth in the points, and that's that?
No. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't expect to see him in Indy. Just with the weekend off, like, I know Ian said that Prado's going to try Indy, but even Prado, I'm like, it's too logical to just say, you know what, let's just wait and take advantage of a week, 2 weeks before Birmingham. Honestly, Birmingham, if I had to bet right now, I would say we go into Birmingham and we have Chase back, we have Prado back, we have Faulkner back, potentially Barsha. Maybe he'll be a week or two later, but potentially that's on the cards. I think we're going to go into Birmingham and have like a stacked field again, which is exciting because it's only really RJ and maybe just RJ, who we've kind of lost long term. Is there anyone else? I feel like I'm forgetting something.
Well, yeah, Anderson, which we'll get to in just a second. But I was going to say one other, and we'll just go ahead and elephant in the room, the Anderson thing here in just a second. But I was going to say on Barsha, he was at Daytona, hanging around with the pits or around the pits with the team. Somebody in the team told me he has started riding. I think just this last week. I don't know if it was just a day or two. So to back what you said, I would not be shocked if we have a Barsha return at Birmingham. I did ask at the time, like, okay, if he's riding, do we have an ETA? And they're like, no. But again, knowing Justin, wanting to get on this bike, wanting to get racing time, I wouldn't be shocked if he lines up at Birmingham.
Yeah, he started riding the week before Daytona, but it was like roll around riding. Like in no way was it day one, here we go. That's coming, I think, this week. And I think a lot of that now will rest upon Dylan's shoulders because he tweaked his thumb in the heat race with Logan Lightsaw at Daytona. We'll have an MRI Monday or Tuesday, one of those. And if Dylan's going to be out now with this thumb issue, then Ducati are going to perhaps hurry Justin back a little bit sooner just to get a bike on the track, because at the moment all of their representation lies on Ferrandis' shoulders. So we await news from Ferrandis about his Indy status, but it's quite telling that he injured the thumb in the heat race, thought he could give it a go in the main event and pulled off on lap 2. That kind of is never a good sign.
Yeah. And then back to what I said about the Anderson-sized elephant in the room. I'm sure most people listening to this that are really into the sport have probably already seen the post floating around social media. So first off, coming into Daytona, we noticed he was not on press day. He had actually removed his social media, went by the team the next morning and asked, what the situation was. And they said he would be taking some time off due to health. It was announced there's just the one round. I asked a few people over in that area and they said, yeah, we think it'll be a couple weeks. And then, Sunday now, somebody posted, I don't know where it started, probably typical on social media of someplace about an arrest record from him back in mid-December that came out. You can look it up. It's pretty simple. It's a domestic, I guess you would call it domestic abuse claim. I went ahead and asked because immediately you read that and you're like, okay, is this the reason he's out? Why wasn't this said? We reached out to the PMG Suzuki team and they basically responded with, their further, since this has come to light, they're looking into it further. They don't have an exact answer at the moment. They're looking into the situation. I wouldn't be shocked based on how we've seen this handled in other sports if this will affect Anderson racing going forward. If there's, everything's, what do you call it, until proven guilty, legal, you can look it all over, but in a lot of situations, especially when it comes to domestic abuse, things of this nature, typically, we have situations where riders or athletes or whatever you want to call in other sports end up having to sit out for a while or take care of these things.
Yeah, I think the other elephant in the room is on the arrest record, warrant, whatever you call that. Obviously, the violation is listed as December the 15th, which is 2 days after the South African WSX race, bizarrely. So everyone now believes that we've all known about this for months and have kept it under wraps. I can honestly say, first of all, I did not hear a single thing about this all season. Since it came out, I've texted multiple people and said, did you know it? Did you even hear an inkling of this? And everyone's like, no. And to be honest with you, I don't think or know that the team even knew, to be honest. Like, I'm not sure if anyone really knew about this, right? Like, I think this has caught everyone by surprise today.
Yes, like I said, there's, on one hand, don't get me wrong, I know people view this publicly, and especially, let's take the team situation, they'll be like, oh, they kept this under wraps, blah, blah, blah. There was nothing to be gained on the team's part by hiding this. I would say based on the comments I've gone back from, the reaction seems genuine. Again, everybody will take, their opinion on this. We'll see what further they issue, what they're going to do with his situation. But yes, again, everybody will say stuff gets swept under the rug. Zero clue. But when I saw the initial PR that he was when I found out it was on press day, when I found out, he would be sitting out the weekend, I'll be honest, I immediately defaulted to kind of what we've done with, like, okay, the sickness, the thyroid issues, which I had a conversation with him fairly frankly at Fox Raceway last year. I know thyroid issues affects him mentally, emotionally, depression-wise, a few other things he kind of commented on. So I was just like, dang, it's flared up. He's taking time off, whether it was super planned with the team or he kind of went a little AWOL like he did at Kawasaki and just sort of like, hey man, just quickly was like, I'm out. That's, the team is just having to react to what information they're given. Now, is that true in the sense of Jason, that is what he was doing with him this time and this just happened to hit at the same time? Or did he know this was coming? Which, I mean, him and his wife have both wiped their social media. Can't find him right now. Yeah, it kind of makes it feel like, one story was told to get him out of racing. They tried, not saying the team again, saying whether it's Jason, his direct group, maybe tried to keep it under wraps, but is ultimately spilled out into the public. And at the end of the day, I feel bad for him. This domestic abuse is nothing to scoff at, laugh at, anything of that nature. I hope all that gets handled with him, wife, kids, all that ends up hopefully getting handled. Bum for the team if they have to deal with this, because again, some people are still going to look at this conspiracy theory wise, whether that is what it was or wasn't.
I'm equally confused, like, why? How has this come out today? I mean, I guess a fan just found it, but why today? Like, I'm so confused how this has just popped up now. Like, yeah, I'm baffled. I'm confused. More information will be gathered, I guess, is my statement.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is, I mean, when again a rider or a person of interest or a person of public appeal is their socials wiped, that might have just triggered somebody to go looking in local court, in local case stuff. Because again, it's not even one of those things where I can say I heard a rumor that something would have happened that, again, maybe somebody did hear something the rest of us didn't, so they went looking, or somebody just went off the fact that this guy's wiped all of his social and they went hunting and found the record. Because like I said, it's from December 15th. I don't know how long it's been a publicly available document. That's the date it happened. I don't know enough about this stuff to know how long that has been publicly available information.
Yeah, and the thing that I saw today, like the first place I saw it was someone texting me a screenshot from Facebook, and it was posted on a Facebook page on December the 15th, which is again even more. I'm like, how did this not land on any fan or person's radar? Like, I'm so, again, I don't know if you've noticed, I'm so confused how this has only just popped up now, because it seems like something that someone would have found on December the 15th, but hey, this is for smarter people than you and I would presume. But yeah, we'll see with Anderson what the next development is. I mean, I believe, or I would presume that if not before Indy, then at Indy, there will be some sort of statement or address from partners, sponsors, team, whatever, because you can't just sweep this one under the rug and ignore it and then never mention it again. So, yeah, I guess we will wait and see. A much better Daytona for Garrett Marchbanks, a big week of testing for him and Chase. Marchbanks again said a lot of suspension work, triple clamps, which is kind of a buzzword with Kawasaki this year for whatever reason. And it worked. I mean, now we'll see if it carries over to like regular Supercross, but this was much needed for Marchbanks, much needed for Kawasaki. This was much needed all around because it was just a steady, solid outing. And Cowie hasn't had many of those lately. So I think they'll take this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not only steady, but I mean, in terms of his results, definitely a big jump up to seventh. Talking to Tickle a little bit, I know, yes, there was some updates a little bit this week, but he also made it seem like that a lot of what changed with Garrett's bike was actually there the week before, just the main didn't go his way. So he labeled as they've been making really good progress with Garrett's side of it the last 2 weeks, talking to his mechanic. It hasn't been as publicized, of course, as Chase's side, but Garrett, yes, definitely has overhauled a few things in his setup. The other, of course, headliner this weekend coming into this week, speaking of the testing situation, was the Kyle Chisholm inclusion, which I think caught some people off guard, but also had some people like, oh, that makes sense because Kyle's well known for his work on the Het bike that ultimately led Kenny there. Kenny rode the base, bike that he came up with. Kyle from, Tokarski works with us, told us Kyle was really involved in setting up I can't think of the year off the top of my head, the newest generation YZ450 when Eli went to resign Chiz was involved in getting a test bike together for him. So again, Kyle has a really good track record in this area. He happens to be doing a little bit of stuff for the PRMX Kawasaki team right now, which is where Chase trains when he's in Florida, is at Chambers facility where all that is. So yeah, Brock said they brought in Kyle to get a couple extra thoughts on the bike. I think he said that him and Chiz both put in 3 days of riding, they put 5.5 to 6 hours each on the bike. He didn't elaborate too much on what they tried. He said it was a host of things, but that their feedback was really similar. So at least it gave them, maybe some more clarification on direction and what certain things are doing on the bike as they're trying to kind of gather direction between Chase and Garrett.
Yeah, I think the Chiz thing at this point was just a very casual, as you mentioned. Hey, we're here. Hey, Chiz is here. Hey, do you want to help us out? Do you want to do that? Like, do you want to have a go at riding this and give us your feedback? I think it's been made to be a grander thing than it maybe is at this point. Now, from what I've heard, I think it could turn into a more serious, permanent position potentially. But as of now, it was kind of a buddies arrangement, let's say, a friendly handshake deal for 1 week or whatever you want to call it. But with Tickle and Chiz both on deck, it's all hands at the helm at Kawasaki. There's at this point, we may end up with like 10 test riders doing a test main event. Because it's tough over there. It's tough. You can't hide from it. But Marchbanks was a nice step up. McElrath found me after the race. I didn't interview him, but he was telling me how much happier he was with the bike, and it all came down to ECU settings. A bit more usable power helped him be a bit more aggressive, push the entire time, and basically a week of working on the ECU helped him to a season best 8th. So that's the story with McElrath and how he got there. My final point on 450s is J-Coop. In the ongoing saga of I can give you a real big positive or a real big negative with J-Coop, we're there again because he was unbelievable in his heat race. 2 seconds a lap faster than anyone at certain points. More aggressive than I think I've ever seen J-Coop look in his life. He was incredible in his heat race. Oh, if only he'd had a start. And then the main event, he got a terrible start once again. And yeah, there wasn't really much there. I don't know what happened. He must have tipped over because he went back to dead last on like lap 2.
He crashed Yeah, he crashed opening lap or second lap, coming up over the roller into the sand section. He like face planted slash high sided into the top of it and off of it, cartwheeled his brains out and got up very far dead last. Everybody was almost landing on his bike, so it took him a while to get going. He had a very big crash to start the main.
But a testament again to his fitness, he set his fastest lap of the race on lap 9, which outside of Hunter was the latest of anyone. And actually, we should have mentioned that Hunter set his fastest lap of the race on lap 17. Whereas for context, Tomac set his best on lap 6, Roczen set his best on lap 2, and Webb on lap 4. So for Hunter to do that on lap 17 is a complete anomaly. And not only was that his fastest lap of the race, it was the overall second fastest lap of the race. So just another positive point for Hunter there. Anything else on 450s?
One's a question for you, and one is a little bit of a statement of info. You mentioned Ferrandis potentially. I will say before that was trending to be possibly Dylan's best Supercross of the weekend. I mean, he qualified first session, in second? Second session was around a top 5 position. I was talking to the team. They said this is the first week kind of up until this point, because of the late start, because of needing feedback, they'd been following Dylan's direction, but they had been constantly circling back to base setting. This was the first week that they said they kind of took control and said, hey, we're going to do XYZ, which I know a part of it is overall, I believe they went stiffer. I think there might have been some chassis changes in sense of maybe some parts or some geometry. But honestly, Dylan looked fantastic in the first time qualifying. I will say his flying lap on the first session was so good. I thought he was going to go to the top of the board, and I think he was only like a 10th off Hunter. So it sucks that, the bit of a ding with an injury, because it seemed like we might finally get away from the 9th or 10th result with him. I also did notice the team did mention to me they've had a few other riders reach out lately about next year, so I'm curious to see where that goes. And then my question for you was related to any real info on Jordan Smith for second 450 race.
Yeah, he crashed a lot. But he was better. I mean, the qualifying was okay. I mean, yeah, there were guys out, so maybe that changes the optics a little bit, but he was like a 11 to 14 sort of guy. And then, yeah, he crashed, I want to say 3 times in the main event, maybe 4. So I think in total in main events so far, 2 main events, he's crashed 7 times overall, I want to say. So we'll get there. I mean, Coca was very positive about Jordan after the race and said that he is happy with the bike now. He stopped chasing his tail there, so now he's going to focus on his technique, presumably for riding a 450 sustainably. Whether that's true or team speak, we'll find out. But yeah, Coca seemed positive, so that tells you everything you need to know about the promising Daytona that Jordan had. So there is that. On to 250s, where Fox Racing took their first 250 SX win of the season. No, they didn't, because they have Hayden Deegan. I got my reads mixed up. Their second. Well, it's not their second. Let's say this. On to 250s, where what I'm trying to say now is Fox Racing had a win in 250SX with a different rider other than Hayden Deegan. Their second different rider, that's the wording, to win 250SX in Seth Hammaker. So congrats to Fox Racing for that. The second nature athletes have it, the ability to make split-second decisions based entirely on feel, impulse, and intuition, to know exactly where their body exists in time and space, sensing the smallest shift in terrain and adjusting without thought. Some call it race instinct, but to them it's just second nature. Awaken your senses with vision, awareness, and diffuse. Fox Racing's collection of limited edition moto kits can be seen at foxracing.com. Big weekend for Fox Racing, so congratulations to them. Of course, they had Ken Roczen on the 450 podium as well, and Jeffrey Hurlings took his first win in Fox Racing colours at Lierop. And Tom Vial was second at a French race, and that's your Fox Racing global update for this week. But if you want me to roll right back into, this is where I got my wires crossed, if you want to roll right into another sponsor, Fox Racing's win in a 250 class came at the expense of Yamaha Motor USA, who lost in 250 Supercross for the first time in 2026. And you may be thinking, Lewis, You're bloody insane. You can't be talking about a sponsor losing. That's negative. Like, no, no, no. The fact that Yamaha Moto USA have just lost for the first time in 2026 says everything you need to know about just how good their 250 is. Because if we're getting to round 8 and the fact that they have lost is a headline, then need I say more, quite simply. So, yeah. It's nice that Fox Racing and Yamaha can unite with Hayden Deegan, though. Bringing Hayden Deegan, just bringing everyone together. That's what he's known for. Honestly, despite the Hammaker qualification crash, I kind of had Hammaker all day. Thought he looked good. Felt like he kind of had the stuff to win Daytona. And yeah, once he got out front in the main event, I would argue it wasn't really in doubt. I mean, Davies looked good at points. Joe looked good at points. But I felt like this was Hammaker's day.
I agree, but I was also still concerned just because, yes, Seth came out firing on all cylinders first thing in the morning. Pretty good get off in the second one, which I will say I was shocked not by his crash, but by the fact that we didn't see more of it. Those offset rollers going into the into that first kind of checkup wall after the mechanics area. Every mechanic, rider, photographer I talked to all day was like, people are going to weed their brains out here tonight. This is going to be so bad. And honestly, Seth was the only big one in that area, which caught me off guard. But not also getting it done in the heat race. I think, did he fall in the heat race as well? Or just
last
start?
Corner, last
What
lap.
I'm getting at is come main event time. Yes, thank you. Pushing, trying to go after Drew. So I did say coming into the main, I'm like, this should be Seth's based on speed for the night. He was clearly the best guy in that regard, but I was also just a little concerned of like, maybe, outside of the first practice, nothing had been that clean. So there was a question of maybe execution. But yes, the fact that he won was not shocking based on how he looked all day.
Was he the best rider, though? Or does that go to Cole Davies?
It was kind of funny. I thought about the Cole Davies thing being not the same, of course, because different scenario, but it did cross my mind of like, oh, beginning of West Coast, we were saying that potentially, I repeat the words potentially, that Levi might be the faster rider. Levi could be the fast guy if he could put it together. And I kind of had a flashback of that thinking about Cole's situation. I am very surprised that we are 2 races in. I mean, it's only 2, but I am surprised we did not have a Cole Davies win yet. And it definitely seems to be, frustrating to him. Cleaned out his teammate in the heat race, and in general, his kind of demeanor after the heat in mains, he definitely does not seem happy with himself. I imagine he pictured himself on the top spot and knows he's riding beyond well enough to be that guy. So, yes, could you argue that Cole was the fastest guy today? I'm sure many could, but Seth was. I will still give that to Seth based on overall performance.
Yeah, Cole Davies has made headlines a little bit with some of his post-race comments. He said, I don't feel like anyone can touch me, and I just need to figure out my starts, and then I'll be away. Which, to be honest with you, people are kind of put out by these comments, but I feel like these comments are kind of consistent with what Davies has been like for a little while now. I think this isn't surprising to me. I think this is just Davies. I think it is striking to some, just because of the limited success that he has had in his career. Like, perhaps this is a bad comparison to make, but that's not actually not. I'm not even going to make that comparison because I think off of that quote, it's a bad comparison. But yeah,
Were you gonna make a Hayden comparison?
No. I was going to say sometimes Eli with the media can be quite short and like but it's not relevant to what those quotes I just used because Eli's never said stuff like that. Yeah. But my point being, Eli can sometimes be short in interviews or whatever else and come across quite standoffish, but he's very much earned that right, like you don't really think about it. Whereas I think Cole, in comparison with his limited success so far, that's why it's maybe a bit more, it's a bit sharper to the viewer, let's say. But yeah, he believes in himself. He has no doubt, that's for sure. No comment on that?
Yeah,
no?
I will say, I mean, I guess, sorry, we've got a delay between us. I'm trying to comment. No, I 100%, what's the word I'm looking for now? I lost my train of thought with that. No, the way he is carrying himself doesn't shock me because I think even though it is a limited amount of success, I think the position he put himself in last year, like you look at him racing. And being Hayden, you see where Hayden is on his coach. Yes, Cole is younger and earlier into this, but I think it's just simply the position this man's putting himself in, not only what he expects of himself. And yes, everybody that's in that top tier group expects to win, but I think he's just putting it out there, putting it there more outwardly of, yes, I'm here to win. I believe I've done everything to win. I know in his head, he knows he's the best guy, whether he is or isn't on that night. He knows he is and can be. And it's interesting. I mean, yeah, I think he's somebody when I talk to people on the team, even they're like, yeah, he's got X amount of years on 250 and we expect him to go 450. Like everyone around him is kind of putting him on this. There's gonna not a mantle, but that there's gonna be a trajectory here. And considering where he was last season, if you're in his situation, you don't want to settle for less. You don't want to if you were here last year, why are you going to be okay with being here this year? Like you expect it to keep going up. You're not going to settle. And that may come across as harsh to some people, but again, I think it's a trajectory thing. Somebody like him isn't here to waste time.
With all of that in mind, then, how much of a miss will it be? Will it be if he loses his championship? Like, is this a slam dunk, must win, a Hayden situation? Like, not losing this is not acceptable and cannot be looked at favorably.
I mean, based on the track record we're seeing with what we're considering, potentially the best guy in motocross supercross right now with Jet Lawrence, and then following up by the rise of Hayden. Neither of them won, correct me if I'm wrong, their supercross titles. They did not win the first 2 years. They won them in year 3 and 4 on a 250. So no, if Cole ultimately doesn't win this championship, it isn't the end of the world. I'm sure it'll be beyond frustrating to him. I'm sure, I don't. It's just kind of weird based on how his season went last year, because I think on paper people look at, well, he beat Hayden and Hayden is so dominant this year. If he loses a title, how's that happen? How is he going to be beat by Seth or Pierce or Joe for a title? However, I think me and you have both agreed on this, and this isn't to downplay Hayden, but I think most people that really watch this agree with this. Hayden took the step finally this year in Supercross that we thought he was going to take last year. He was good last year, but he wasn't amazing. So I think Davies' trajectory is just fine, but some people might skew it if he doesn't get the title this year.
I was very impressed with Pierce. I thought he was very good all day, and this was a very adequate backup to Arlington. Just a little bit slow to get going in the main event, but that aside, this was a 10 out of 10 day and gave me a lot of confidence in Pierce's ability to make a run at this title. It really did. So I think you would call it a success for Pierce, right?
I think in Pierce's situation, something I was happy to see, it sounds so dumb, is also not as expressive of it as Davies, but him being frustrated with his position in the main. I think sometimes you see guys come in as the unexpected red plate holder, and I don't know if they know how to carry themselves or what to expect themselves. Pierce won the opening round, holds the red plate. Even with his result at Daytona, he looked extremely unsatisfied with himself on the podium. This is a man that is here to also race for the championship and expects that of himself. So, yes, I think the ride was solid. I'm happy with maybe the way he looks at the ride. He is not satisfied with how the night went down. Actually, it's kind of funny is between him and the way, again, Cole's carrying himself, and I think, these opening 2 rounds not quite falling in Joe's favor. I mean, the old classic saying, the only person that was actually happy last night was the winner, Seth. Anybody else in the group was not stoked with their performance. Drew wadded out of what could have been a great night for him, and again, between Cole, Joe, and Pierce, none of them were extremely satisfied with their results. So the only person who's happy is Seth.
Yeah, Joe, to your point, also not very happy after the race. Said he's looking for more hold-up and he's chasing bike settings a little bit at the moment, which of course isn't a surprise because he had no off-season. So what else would you expect? But crucially, he said that he is has no doubt about his fitness. And that's as good as it needs to be. And it's not even a thing in his mind. And I even said, the Triple Crown will be more demanding, obviously. Is there any concern? He's like, nope, there's no worries. My fitness didn't play a role tonight here at Daytona. It was just the fact that the bike wasn't where I needed it to be and I needed more hold up. So yeah, I think Joe's in a good place, and maybe we need to reassess our evaluation of him from coming into the season. Equally, maybe some of you need to reassess your evaluation of Yoshimura. Of course, they're so tied to Honda HRC, but they have many more packages out there, including one for the KX450. So if you've got that, you can upgrade it with championship-proven power. The 2024 and 2026 Kawasaki KX450 and KX450X can now be taken to the next level with the refined performance of the Yoshimura RS12. Developed with direct input from six-time national enduro champion Stu Baylor, the new RS12 full system is engineered to deliver increased torque and usable power right where riders need it most. If you own a KX450 or KX450X and want proven performance on the track or trail, trust the name champions rely on. Find yours at yoshimura-rd.com. Thank you to Yoshimura for their support of this podcast, of course. I will say the biggest disappointment to me, and I think you would probably agree, was Nate Thrasher. Heat race and main event. It was right there for the taking. And honestly, it was to the point where I left Daytona going, is there something we don't know about? Is there an injury? That's how negative it was in my mind. Not good at all. And it's got to be said, through 2 rounds, has Nate Thrasher done anything to register in your mind? Or it's arguably one of his worst starts.
Yeah. I mean, the term that pops to mind, of course, he's invisible. He is the most, even though he's technically beat Dudney last night, he is the most invisible rider at Star Racing right now. Again, we talked about a bit preseason. He's amongst 4 riders there that's out of contract. And Nate, year after year has, won a race and put himself in a position where you're like, okay, I understand how this guy could figure it out and could race for a title. And it's just another year that feels like it's going to be wasted. Yeah, he could turn it around. Yeah, there's a good chance he still wins a race this year because that's what Nate does. But yeah, this is, especially Daytona. We don't have Atlanta on the schedule anymore, but Nate's always been good at the speedway races, quote unquote, on those conditions for some reason. Yeah, it's just a mystery. I literally just want to walk over there next week and go, okay, was he hurt a chunk of the off season? What are we missing? Like, what is going on? Because this is not computing.
Yeah, it's even more not computing when the talk in the off season was he was flying. So I'm very much confused. 2 final points on 250s from me before we go. One, Jalek Swole was docked 2 positions for grooming the front of his start gate. He did that, I'm not sure exactly on the mechanics of it, but the infraction occurred when he was pulling away from his for his parade lap. So I don't know, but that penalty was handed. So he was 8th in the classification, dropped to 10th, and therefore the winners there were Park and Simonson, who gained a position consequently. And as we mentioned, Drew Adams went down hard at the end of the day in the whoops, and he was already in a soft cast by the time the 450 main event finished. He has injured his thumb, but he said from the x-ray at the track, it seems like just bone damage, not ligament. He's going to have an MRI Monday or Tuesday, like Dylan, to determine a course of action, but he is steadfast in his resolve that he will be in Indianapolis because he said his sole goal this year was to compete at every race, and he doesn't plan to stop now. So whilst perhaps unlikely, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if Drew is in Indy fighting through the pain, maybe a shadow of himself, but at least putting points on the board.
A couple small notes. One, I mean, it's so early to say, but the one, I don't want to say disheartening because 5th is still good, but for Dax to come out podium opening round, 5th now, knowing that Nate could pick up the pace, knowing that things could change, I'm curious to see how many rounds it takes Dax to be back on the podium because ultimately I think that's what anybody would want to see from him this year, is just not to be the opening round one-hit wonder. Dudney was a bit, just reuse my term from Thrasher, a little bit invisible in Daytona compared to his opening race. Another one that'll be interesting to watch bounce back. And then one I was going to ask you, were you surprised that Valentin Guillaume bounced back as good as he did in Daytona? 14th, decent result, but the most outdoor-esque Supercross we had of the year. But again, for a man that's, how old is Valentin? 30?
33.
To be racing his first ever 250 Supercross to his first ever main event.
No, I think this is where he should be, 9-14. He was in a deep, dark place in Arlington, bike problems, uncomfortable. we will see in Indy, but I don't think you take that big a jump just because it's Daytona. I don't think that's possible. Maybe, yeah, a small bump, like 5 positions, but you don't go from 33rd in qualifying to top 10, I think it was, top 12. Like, that doesn't just happen because of Daytona.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I think that he will be a main event guy every week.
Yeah. Well, last week, for anybody who didn't know, the last round, constant technical problems with the bike, so he barely was ever even able to put in any sort of a lap. It was a little bit surprised. I got to go back and check the heat races because, again, shooting, sometimes I miss this stuff. Very surprised to see Luke Clout miss the main in Daytona.
He crashed twice in the LCQ for sure, and once in the heat on lap 1, potentially. So just crashes. But yeah, that's not good because Clout, it goes without saying, but Clout is without doubt easily a main event guy with his eyes closed, blindfolded, hands tied behind his back, etc., etc. So I expect that to be rectified come Indianapolis. Another final point from me, Motorex, known for high quality engine oils, also have an entire line of clean care and lube products to keep your bike running strong and looking great. Maintenance made easy with race proven Motorex clean care and lube products. Any final thoughts?
No, I think that's it.
All right, well, thank you everyone for listening or watching this episode of the Vital MX Post-Race Show, and we will see you next week to discuss Indianapolis.